Once a vast, mighty, and magnificent empire, India was brilliantly organized and culturally unified. With that, an undeveloped semi-feudal realm, riven by religious factionalism and barely able to feed its illiterate, diseased, and stinking masses. This unexpectedly was Britain. India was captured by a lowly nation 20 times smaller than itself. Some say India wanted the British out since the 5 minutes they stepped foot on Indian sand. Gandhi said, "The English have not taken India, we have given it to them." Countries born from blood. The independence of India and partition of 1947. While Indian independence and partition was quite triumphant, for it gave India self-rule or Swaraj and Muslims religious freedom, tragedies accompanied it because India lost millions of their population to Pakistan, found that some people ended up in the wrong country, and many killings occurred from opposing religions. The Mughal Empire in 1577 tried to unite all of India. The average Indian had a greater pay and had fewer taxes than their descendants. The empire was governed by Muslims, but non-Muslims were treated just as equally. However, the trouble all began when Queen Elizabeth initiated the East India Company in the 1600s. As mentioned in the book Indian Summer, King Charles turned the company into a monstrosity, giving them an amazing array of rights, and by 1670 the company could mint its own coin, maintain its own army, wage war, make peace, acquire new territories, and impose its own civil and criminal laws. And all without any accountability. The company is a private empire of money, and it was incredibly successful as well as brutal. In 1834, the East India Company was still governing, but its trading ceased. In the late 1850s, approximately 70% of the Indian subcontinent was conquered by the British. The first attempt for Indian independence was the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. Cartridges were made of greased paper that had to be bitten off to be used by the sepoys, which were Indian soldiers. A rumor spread that the grease was made out of pig fat or cow fat. Though it was never proven, it offended both Muslim and Hindu religions. It may have been started by Indian agitators to damage the company. The British reply to it was by replacing the fat with ghee and beeswax, but it was far too late. Many British actions, such as the evangelism of Christianity and the attacks of Indian cultural traditions, helped push the British control too far. After several small-scale rebellions, the mutiny exploded with full force at the town of Meerut, just northeast of Delhi. Many refused to use the cartridges, and as news spread, it agitated one-third of the subcontinent by mid-June of 1857. In response, the British burned villages, killed men, and raped women. By 1858, India was fully recognized as a colony of Britain, ruled by viceroys. The East India Company was dissolved, and India was in direct control of Britain. The uprising was declared over on July 8, 1859. In 1885, the Indian National Congress was started by Allan Octavian Hume to advocate for the Indian participation in government. The first meeting was held December 25, 1885. In 1904, the Muslim League was created by Muhammad Ali Jinnah to support the rights of the Muslim minority. By the 1920s and 30s, Gandhi was the president of the INC. The once political party turned into a massive movement and nonviolent protest against British rule. British say that the uprisings were getting out of hand, so they placed laws to prohibit public opposition. The Rowlatt Bills were an anti-terrorist legislation which outlawed gatherings. One in particular was held in Amritsar, a city in India north of Delhi. General Dyer came to command the chaotic city and he said that any gatherings will be fired on. April 13, 1919, a holiday for Sikhs and Hindus, a gathering at Jallianwala Bagh was held. No warning was given before Dyer opened fire. 1,650 bullets were fired, all the exits were blocked, 120 bodies were suffocating in the water thick with blood, and the massacre lasted until all ammunition was out. 379 people were found dead, and 1,200 more were injured. The massacre polarized political opinion across the empire. This event provoked many other uprisings and began the nationwide opposition of the British rule. Mahatma Gandhi led several small-scale rebellions against the British, but none that impactful. Jawaharlal Nehru and Muhammad Ali Jinnah were now fighting for the destiny of their countries. Gandhi and Nehru advocated for an independent but united India, whilst Jinnah used the empty threats of an independent nation for the Muslims just to get respect for the minority religion. Clement Attlee spoke to Parliament that British rule would end by June of 1948. However, the Viceroy at that time, Lord Louis Mountbatten, had concealed the date of independence by August 15, 1947, almost a year before anyone expected. Many negotiations and meetings were held for the finalization of the country's future. Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a British judge, hurriedly drew the border of Pakistan, knowing little or none about the country he was doing it for. He was given barely 40 days to recreate the map of southern Asia. The borders were finally announced 2 days after India's independence, on the 17th. Pakistan was partitioned and became an independent nation on the 14th of August, 1947. India became independent a day after, on the 15th. As written in the book India and Pakistan, in 1947, Great Britain, weakened by World War II and faced with growing political resistance to British rule, granted independence to its imperial position.
At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
The League and the Congress agreed to establish borders, making the northeast and northwest borders of India into one country, divided into West Pakistan and East Pakistan, located about 1,000 miles apart. With Indian support, East Pakistan gained independence in 1971, becoming Bangladesh. Though Jinnah, Gandhi, and Nehru were all content with the result, they had no idea about the atrocities that were to come. Partition, as most people know, is the division of India and Pakistan. However, it is much, much more than that. Partition is the mass migration of 10 million people to their designated religious country. About 12 million people became refugees, and tens of thousands of women were abducted. During partition, about 2 million people died just trying to get across the border. Many families were torn apart, and many difficulties came along with the migration. Mob violence accompanying the refugee movement and resettlement was caused by religious conflict that was often stoked by politicians spreading stories of barbarities. Authorities on the border had not expected such sectarian violence. Partition had shaken the subcontinent and would impact it till this day. In the tragedy of partition, 3 wars were fought, and the Indus Water Treaty was a triumph of water sharing and peaceful coexistence. The unresolved arms race between the two countries hampers both its economic and social development. Both countries believed that as they both spend significant amounts on their military forces, they have failed to invest in their people and committed limited resources to solve serious problems such as poverty and infrastructure development. Conclusively, rivalries continued thereafter, but with political desire, the countries could possibly unite.